Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Juan's World. And as I kind of suspected on Friday, I'm not going to do any cooking for you today because I didn't do anything particularly revolutionary or creative over the weekend. It is, however, an interesting day. The monsoon season has really kicked up a notch. For the last hour or so, it has been just drenching rain and flying, howling winds. I looked out of my French doors a little while ago and I saw a huge beach umbrella which the security guard uses down on the ground floor, just whipping across my balcony and making a huge ruckus. This is just phenomenal weather, and brings up my topic for the day, which is the signs that some kinds of Christians, mostly evangelical Christians, but other denominations also, use, these signs that the end is approaching, that the end is nigh, as used to be found sometimes on sandwich boards that older men would carry around cities in England, preaching that, repent, your sins will come and haunt you, but the end is near, Armageddon is coming, Jesus is coming back. And so my topic today is why it is that people are so enamored of these notions that the world is about to end. Jehovah's Witness is one of the denominations that is built on this premise, and it has 8.5 million believers worldwide, at least according to their tally. Don't know how many of them are actually believers. And 8.5 million worldwide is not a huge percentage of the population of the world, but it's still a lot of people, and they are very persistent. So what's it all about? Why do people consistently want to believe that the world is about to end? Let's discuss that. Now, I don't think that there is a simple answer to that question. And the reason I don't think there's a simple answer is partly because I am an anthropologist and I don't believe in simple answers. I don't think that whenever you see something unusual in a culture, you can put it all down to one cause, particularly if you've got several million people believing this particular thing, as in the case that end times are here. People are going to have different reasons for believing it. But you can say overall, there is at least an underlying desire for some kind of comfort. And that's really, to me, the baseline, that people are concerned about how things are right now, and they don't know what the future is going to hold. And so grab onto something that seems to them reasonable. Well, the idea that the world is coming to an end doesn't seem remotely reasonable to me. But it does seem reasonable to some people, and it has for a very, very long time. One of the things we know very well, although it tends to get brushed under the carpet, is that first century Christians thought that the return of Jesus was imminent. It seems clear that Paul, who is arguably the most important apologist for Christianity, believed that the world was about to end. He tells his followers, don't get married. Why not? Because the world's coming to an end. What's the point of getting married and having children when there's no future? Much better to look to your spiritual growth and development right now so that you are prepared for the end. That was Paul's teaching and was followed by quite a few people in the first and second centuries. That was 2,000 years ago, right? The world still has not come to an end. So what's going on? I mean, there was a time when at the time it was a Julian calendar, when the Julian calendar was about to tick over from 999 to 1000, when a lot of people believed, okay, this is it. A lot of people believe that round numbers are somehow or other instructive of what's going to happen in the future. At the middle to the end of the 19th century in the United States, there were many cults that arose that believed that the world was ending, including Seventh-day Adventists, the original sects that became Jehovah's Witness, all manner of them, Mormons, Dravidians, most of all of them coming from some parts of upstate New York for some reason or other. All of them preaching that the world is going to end very soon and Jesus is going to come back and is going to usher in 1,000 years of paradise for all the resurrected here on earth. And it's happening almost instantly, very soon. Now, I don't see anything, certainly in the scientific literature, and not a lot in the Bible either, to support this point of view. When you look back in history, you see that every generation, to some extent or another, when they see some kind of catastrophe, then prophesy, oh, okay, here it is, the end is here. What are the signs of the end? Wars, earthquakes, poverty, famine. Well, they're not particularly useful signs because they happen all the time. But you can't say to me, oh, when there are a lot of wars, then look out. Of course I'm going to look out when there are a lot of wars, but there have been a lot of wars through history, and the end hasn't happened because there's been a lot of wars. Or devastating earthquakes. There have been devastating earthquakes for centuries. Even what are considered to be, unusual signs, like the moon turning to blood. Well, there are blood moons that appear now and again. There are solar eclipses. There are all kinds of things that happen, and the world still hasn't come to an end. Why do people want to put their faith in the end of the world? That's the burning question. Let's look at, to begin with anyway, the kinds of predictions that exist. And there really are two major books in the Bible. They are the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, sometimes called the Apocalypse. Those are the ones that evangelical Christians point to, because they both have within them seemingly cryptic prophecies. Now, here's the thing you need to know about those books, particularly Daniel. Like, Daniel is set in the time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian captivity, when the people of Judah, primarily from Jerusalem, the aristocracy, the priests, the scribes, and so forth, in the 6th century BCE, were all transported to Babylon. And Daniel supposedly takes place during that time, that Daniel is in the court of Nebuchadnezzar and he has various prophecies and so forth. Well, modern scholarship has made it very clear that the book of Daniel is not contemporary history. It was not written in the 6th century BCE. It was likely written much, much later, in the time of the Hasmonean Empire, that is when the various Greeks were ruling Judea and were causing all kinds of problems for worship. And the book of Daniel is written to prophesy that those kings will all be conquered. So that it's less prophecy about the future and more commentary about the present. And the same is true of the book of Revelation. It appears to be about Babylon. There's the odd coincidence. Daniel appears to be about Babylon. It's not. It's about Jerusalem. Revelation uses the word Babylon all the time, that Babylon will fall, the whore of Babylon will be conquered, blah, 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 blah. Babylon in Revelation is a code word for Rome. The beast of Babylon in Revelation has 7 heads, and those 7 heads are supposedly 7 hills. Well, what city has 7 hills? Not Babylon. Babylon's in a plain. Rome is the city of 7 hills. It's code, it's cryptic. And it's also talking about how Rome will fall. It's not talking about the end of the world. It's talking specifically about the end of the Roman Empire, because at that time Christians were being heavily persecuted by Roman emperors. And Revelation is proposing solace or comfort for people under persecution. That leads me to my general thought, that is that people are most likely to cling to prophecies of the end and a new paradise, a new millennium. These are called millennial movements, with millennium meaning 1,000 years, because there's supposedly a millennial paradise on earth that is going to be ushered in by the end, according to Revelation. So these millennial movements are movements of great comfort. Well, who needs comfort? People in trouble. Right? People who are not in trouble don't need to be comforted. People who are poor, who are oppressed, who feel that their circumstances are outside their control, will gravitate towards religious systems that offer comfort in the form of a paradise on earth very soon to happen. It's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but very soon. The Jehovah's Witness won't say too much about it now because it's a little bit embarrassing. But they began prophesying the end of the world back in the 1880s. And one of their times to look out for was 1914. They did a lot of mathematical calculations based on Daniel mostly, and decided that 1914 was the year. They got the date of the Babylonian captivity wrong by quite a long way, but it led them to the year 1914. When that didn't happen, then they changed their minds to 1925 and then to 1975. They used to say, stay alive till 75. Well, they don't say any of that anymore now. They say, oh, well, you know, Jesus did come back, but he came back invisibly, and the end is coming and will happen very soon. Now, I've known people in many walks of life who have accepted these prophecies. And some of them been people who are quite comfortably well off, you know, own their own homes. I had one friend who was very much involved in this, who had a nice house, good job, his own in-ground swimming pool, multiple cars and so forth. But he did not have any positions of power or authority within my community, and I think that that's one of the issues. But there may be others underlying as well. You can probably list for yourself the kinds of feelings of being disempowered that people may have. They may feel, for example, that the government is always doing them a disservice. They're paying too many taxes, they're being cheated in one way or another, and they don't have the control to change things. A number of people, even if they're fairly well off in terms of their finances and general well-being, can still feel as if things are out of control. And I would say that is another one of the major contributing factors. Now, why people feel that they're out of control or don't have control is something that also intrigues me in a lot of ways, and I want to talk about that in future videos, because I think it is one of the grave mistakes that people make, that they lack control. People have more control than they think because they have more control over themselves than they are aware of. And a lot of that has to do with the ways in which they construe themselves and their place in the world. And one of the things that I think is really, really important and often misunderstood about Christianity, and you'll find this not in Revelation, not in Daniel, but in the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, Jesus lays out the way to take control of your life. And among other things, he says, stop worrying. You know, just pay attention to essentials. Like, make sure you have enough to eat. Make sure that you have a place to sleep. Doesn't have to be a palace, you know, but he says, well, God provides for the birds of the air. You know, they have a place. So you can find a place. Just don't fret about things. You can't add an inch to your height by fretting. what you can do is you can take control. And one of the things you can take control of is your ability to care for others. If you care for others, and certainly if everybody cares for others, we'll all be okay. If we all start looking out for ourselves and grasping for ourselves, we're always going to feel out of control. We're always going to feel as if we don't have enough. Whereas if we look out for others, then they'll look out for us, and we'll be all right. That is the heart of Christianity, and that's something I want to push over against hoping that Jesus will come back and usher in Armageddon and a millennium of paradise. We can usher in our own paradise on earth if we take control ourselves. Okay, more about that in future videos. For now, just tell your friends what I'm trying to do here. Like, subscribe, and I will continue on Fridays. See you then.